Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Back to the TARDIS podcast. I'm Jeff.
I'm Aurora.
And I'm June.
And this week we are discussing The Woman Who Fell to Earth, Series 11, Episode 1 by Chris Chibnall.
Oh boy, the hellhole is here.
This is the debut episode for Chris Chibnall's era. It is the debut episode for Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor, and it is the debuts of Graham, Ryan, and Yaz. I will start this off by saying that this episode is actually fine. It's decent. It's one of his best outings, IMO. It's clear he had a lot more time to put into the script on this one than he did on some of his other episodes.
Yes.
However, at the same time, you can clearly see where some of the issue points will be.
Yeah. It is decent. It is. We'll get into it. I think I said in the Discord channel in our chat that like everything's only kind of bad. And at this stage,
yeah,
when it was premiering, it's like, you don't really notice that because it's like, okay, early steps, whatever. But then, like, we know where this ends. So it's fascinating.
It's so weird to watch it because the vibe, like, I can't even justify some of this, but just the vibe is so off. Like, it's a decent episode, but you watch it and it's just like, it just feels so weird.
Yeah, I feel like 13 is on like a rarely like good form here, and it's weird how like the episode where she's explicitly like loopy and slightly loopy in the post-regenerative, all of that, and still hasn't figured out exactly who she is yet. She feels better and a more well-done character than when they actually try to give her something that she is.
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time, it feels like every single one of the three companions have like more going on. Like it feels like there was a bunch of places where I was like, wait a second, why didn't you ever bring up this angle of the character again? There was like an angle there that you could have gone for. Or just like Graham being weirdly way more prickly in this one than he is in any other episodes that he's in. And all of that. And it feels like it's so weird coming back and watching this, because I feel like if I was watching this in the context of it being a first time viewing again, I'd be like, okay, this is a solid enough start. There's clearly places you could take this. And then they just didn't do that.
Yeah, I mean,
they didn't do any of that.
I remember how excited I was for this episode for the same reason. One thing that's kind of like you notice now a lot more is I feel like, with these introduction episodes, usually it's to introduce the characters and to really get to know the characters. And so the monster story is sort of on the back burner. And like the monster story is on the back burner here, but I feel like it doesn't actually make space for us to get to know any of the characters that much. Like, I feel like I don't, coming out of this episode, I don't think I would have any strong impressions of what any of these characters are like. And that's so different than the other introduction episodes.
We have a primer.
Yeah.
And it's, as you said, I mean, I think these introduction episodes, they're always interesting to analyze. I still think as far as first episodes go, 11th Hour is still the gold standard. This isn't bad by any means, but it's like, there's so much that was not followed through on, and it makes me sad, especially because like 13. It's clear that like I don't think any of us started off as haters of this era, but it's just like, like the potential is here, and we know that it's hollow.
Yeah, it's like I watch 13 and Jodie is 13 in this episode, and it feels weird because I feel like she's never really been the biggest problem with the era, but it definitely feels like I'm watching this and I'm like, I actually really like 13 in this episode a lot. Now, admittedly, maybe that is partly down to the fact that this episode features her best fit by a long shot.
God,
Yeah.
It has that whole, like, I commented, like, obviously the episode title is Woman Who Fell to Earth, but it legitimately feels like, to some extent, with her hair and like her the 12th Doctor's clothes that she's wearing, she does kind of look like a gender swapped version of David Bowie in Man Who Fell to Earth.
Oh boy.
And I kind of fuck with that. Because, like, I've been saying for ages that we should have a Doctor with Bowie vibes.
Yeah, one thing I really enjoyed about Jodie here is, like, she, obviously Jodie's always been good, but I feel like what they were going for here was, she's sort of still got these, like, artifacts of 12's mannerisms and, like, persona and stuff, and she, like, really embodies that in a way of, she's, like, confused about who she is and, like, still bringing forth the 12 kind of, but in a way that it's, like, slipping away from her over the course of the episode, and it's, like, it's really compelling, and I'm just like, oh, she's, like, it's the same as you. Like, I obviously never thought that Jodie was the problem with this era and that she's always been, like, really good, and it's just, like, this episode really emphasizes that, like, she's really good at this.
Yeah, she is very gender this episode. I really wish.
Yeah.
It makes me lament that, like, I want a female Doctor that does not fall into the female lead of a sci-fi thing problem of, like, I don't know how to describe it other than, like, Janeway or someone, where it's just like, okay, they can be, like, feminine but not, like, too, like, it's just like, start her off with these clothes, that's amazing, but then, like, I can tell you what, my heart dropped by the time of the wardrobe reveal, because I was just like, oh yeah, this is what she has for the rest of the time, except for, like, 2 occasions.
And both occasions are noticeably better. Like, the tuxedo fit in Spyfall is legitimately, like, just as good as this fit, IMO. Mm-hmm. And then, like, the color swapped version where she has the darker coat in that one flashback episode in Flux also looks better.
Yeah, and then
it's like she doesn't look right in light colors.
I still haven't seen the episode, but her fit in Sea Devils, also good.
Oh yeah, that one's pretty good.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And I think, I don't know what it is about her hair here. Maybe it's like that, like, more of the roots are showing through, but, like, it also, like, that blonde looked better here. And I don't want to go off the rails of, like, critiquing the clothes more than the performance, because the performance is actually, like, really good and, again, shows promise. She's probably more open with her companions in this episode than she is, like, for the entire rest of the show, and that's for her tenure, and that's probably not on purpose, but it's just like,
I'm gonna jump ahead a second here, and I think it's really fucking funny how, like, near the end of the episode, Graham brings up the fact that he had cancer, and, like, she just kind of lets that rock and sits with it, as opposed to just being like, wow, I don't know what to say in this situation.
Yeah. And again, there are points we will get to where I will critique, like, how the 13th Doctor is written, or how there is some character work that's just a bit off. As I said, everything at this stage is only a little bit bad.
Yeah. I feel like the look of the episode too, like, people dunk on the way that 13's era looks, and I feel like generally this episode is pretty decently lit and the colors look all right, but then every now and then you'll get to, like, a mid shot. Like, the one that comes to mind where I really noticed it is that shot of Graham eulogizing Grace at the funeral. His fucking forehead is out of focus.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? How do you fuck that up? That's basic shit.
So I guess this is the point for me to like interject with what I thought when I first started watching this episode, which is like the sort of like field of or like the depth of focus is so short.
Depth of field.
Yeah, that like the entire background is always out of focus, and it almost looks like the volume. Like the opening scenes have it so bad that it literally looked like it was filmed at the volume, because you have these like floating heads in space, and it looks like the entire background is just like projected.
Yeah, I will say I think the nighttime scenes all look pretty good.
I would agree.
I think the daytime stuff gets a little bit dicey, but the nighttime stuff looks pretty good.
There's just something about how they mix the color and how they do the depth of field that just like really mucks up the vibe, and it was a whole problem across the whole Chibnall era, like really.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you look at the start of the episode, and I guess to get into like actual episode stuff here and to try and go in a methodical order, but you get the start of the episode, first off, starts with Ryan first, who like the series very quickly abandons to focus more on like Graham, and then Yaz. So it's really weird that they're centering him first, because he ends up like pretty much not doing much of anything after this. They bring up the vlog thing, which, does that ever come back? Ever?
I don't think it does.
Or like anything about what Ryan wants to be as a person?
Yeah, it's very, very boomer writing on that. I was just like, yeah, you're with a title like Hey, it's not gonna get you in the algorithm, buddy. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's also very weird of just like the framing is supposed to be like when the episode opens, you're supposed to think that he's going to be talking about the doctor, but
no, you absolutely are.
But
yes.
Then he's not, because he's talking about Grace. But yeah, there's just a bunch of character threads with him that are picked up. We learn, I forgot that he wants to be a mechanic, because I don't think that ever comes up, really. Yeah, just a bunch of things about these characters that is just like, oh yeah, Graham was a bus driver. Nice, I guess.
He has a couple lines about it here, and yeah, I don't think it ever comes up again. Like, it seems like in this episode, it feels like a big part of his character. Like, he's like, yeah, you always gotta listen to the bus drivers, and then it just never comes up again.
It comes up in Rosa, when he's just like, oh yeah, back to the bus. It sounds
I'm sorry, just like you saying, it comes up again in Rosa, and I just like immediately double over in laughter, because of fucking course they're like, ah yes, he's the bus man. He knows about bus history. It's just such a stupid, perfectly Chibnall thing.
Yeah. God.
But okay, credit to the opening scene, past the vlog. Good stuff with the riding the bike thing. I think that's a good way to like kind of start the episode. It's a more effective like bookend than the vlog is.
Yeah, so I feel like the one thing that always like gets me with the bike thing is like, so obviously Ryan has dyspraxia. That's like pretty much the only major character trait he has in the rest of the series. That like, that's about it. And you know, he still can't ride a bike. It feels like, I appreciate the effort to try and introduce neurodiversity properly into Doctor Who and to do something with that, or in disability. But it feels like A, they tend to forget about it and just drop it. And B, like, admittedly, I don't know how people with dyspraxia actually move, but I feel like they could have used like some sort of consultant or someone, because the way it looks like is just like constant pratfalls and missing things. It doesn't look like someone who is genuinely having an issue. It looks like someone who knows what they're doing but has to fall over for the scene to work. Not to say that the character is faking it, obviously, just that I feel like having a coach or some consultant to get the look of that more right would make it feel like it fit a little bit better and represented people better.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's interesting, because it would be an interesting discussion to have, because I don't know a lot of, mobility. Obviously recently we've gotten what's her name in Unit? I feel bad. The scientific advisor in the wheelchair.
Shirley.
Yeah. But yeah, it just seems that, like, when it comes to Ryan, it's like the disability is more like a trait, and it's like whenever Ryan needs to do something for the plot, they can just say like, "Oh, but what about your dyspraxia? Oh, I need to do it," and then he does it. And it's like, I'm sure that I would be curious to know how people with dyspraxia feel about that, because I know that there are like good body days and like bad body days, and some days, Ryan probably could have an easier time riding a bike or climbing a ladder, and other days not. But yeah, it's just basically like if you're looking at like a D&D sheet of just like, has this, check.
Yeah. Yeah. Similarly, like you cut to like Yaz's bit here, and it's weird because I feel like if Yaz was the sole companion the entire time, they could have really done something with this and made it great, because I think there is really something about the fact that she is set up as someone who wants to help people and craves adventure and doesn't get enough of that and isn't particularly respected as a cop. But like that character angle just kind of disappears, other than the fact that she sticks with the doctor till the very end, until 13 breaks up with her, basically. But like that's more implicit than explicit, I think.
Yeah. We spend a bit more time with Yaz's family, a little bit more in, obviously Demons of the Punjab in a way, and then the horrible spiders episode.
Yeah.
And then like, but aside from that, it's like, yeah, she's a cop, which like barely comes up. It was weird seeing Yaz act like a cop, because it doesn't come up. It's like, I think Gwen Cooper has more time collectively as a police officer, and having that be relevant, way more time than Yaz. So it's just like, yeah, why is she a police officer? Well, we find out eventually it's because a police officer was like good to her when she was like depressed. And that's a little bit facetious, but like that's basically it. It's like,
she exists
there's
in
that
the alternate universe where cops don't constantly bring up the fact that they're cops and act like cops in every situation.
Yes.
Doctor Who. So yeah, there's like that, and then eventually there's like the drop that like she's gay, or at least she's queer. We don't know if she's only attracted to women. I don't think that's ever explicitly stated, because explicit queer rep in Chibnall era. Are you crazy?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also funny here being like, yeah, they definitely didn't plan that far ahead here.
Well, yeah, because again, from the beginning, Thasmin was never intended. The actresses just liked it, so Chibnall was like, fuck it, let's go for it in the final 3 episodes of the tenure.
Yeah, and also it's completely fine if like actors influence like the character arcs and such, but like again, I think the whole theme of this, and why we've never done like a full run through, is that we would be basically repeating at different stages. Oh, this is good, it shows promise. It's a shame about that.
Shame about shame about the fact that nothing ever came of that. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it's really odd and kind of sad. I also think it's very funny too how Yaz meets up with Ryan because he calls the cops after he finds the weird alien thing down in the forest, and they realize, oh, hang on, I know you. And he fucking calls her a Fed, which is legitimately, I think, the most leftist thing that happens in the entirety of Chibnall's era.
And then she's like, we don't like call it that. And he's just like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever.
And then it's really funny because then like 2 episodes from later, they have that fucking pretentious ass stupid scene in Rosa where they're talking about like racism and shit. And Yaz like brings up that she's a cop, and like they don't really talk at all about police brutality in a serious manner. It's crazy.
In liberal Doctor Who, perish the thought.
Yeah. I will just say, however, I think the absolute star of the episode by a long shot, which makes it really funny that they kill her off for a twist, is Grace.
Grace is great. Genuinely.
Yeah. Like, I watched this episode, and I feel like I had this opinion at the time, and I've had it every single time I've rewatched the episode, which was killing off Grace was a mistake. I think Grace should have been... Well, actually, I feel like I know why she isn't, but, like, she isn't in Graham's spot because then they wouldn't have a white guy on the team. Like, realistically, that's probably the reason, but, like, she feels so much more, like, interesting and vibrant as a character and suited to being a companion, and you could argue that maybe that's what the episode's going for, of, like, tricking you, except A, we already knew who the companions were, and B, yeah, because you fucking laid it on so thick about her doing increasingly dangerous and stupid things until she eventually accidentally dies.
And it's like, if you want to do the whole, like, Ryan and Graham are kind of forced in their grief or in, like, the absence of Grace to, like, grow closer, you could do one of two things. You could have, A, had her not die and be in a coma, because let's not kill all our black female characters. That,
B, you could have actually done that.
Yeah, or you could have done a thing which Chibnall was already doing, in that, like, they all accidentally get whisked along on the Doctor's search for the TARDIS, and then for some whatever contrived reasons, they can't get home in a while. So then they're forced to bond that way. It's just like going for the easy thing, the emotional, like, I don't know if you would exactly call it fridging, but it's a shame that, like, the most well-realized character that he did not have time to fuck up with dropping threads is because he killed her in his first episode.
Yeah. It feels like, sometimes people talk down on certain pieces for including twists just for the sake of there being a twist and that being bad. And so, I'm talking about The Last Jedi. I'm talking about The Last Jedi again. I don't think The Last Jedi does what it does just to be shocking and to subvert. I think, yes, it is subversive, and yes, it is saying something, but I think it is in purpose of a good message. Fucking... I really feel like this is just there to have a shocking swerve, and it's not particularly great. That being said, to try and jump us back to where we were, this scene on the train, this scene on the train is great. It's just a good scene. Even if it's kind of a silly eye roll thing that they play, like, the Doctor Who theme as she, like, crashes through the train and stands up. It's a little silly, but, like, you get the ability to do that. That's fair.
Appropriate amount of cheese.
Yes. Yeah, and again, I think she makes a great first impression here. Like, really, really good. Like, I guess to some extent it's like, yes, she does have post-regenerative loopiness to some extent, but, like, it's really not as much as any other, like, post-regeneration in New Who. aside from the Star Beast and aside from the last couple, but that doesn't really count because they were non-standard regenerations. Like, yes, there's a little bit. There's the talk of her still rebooting. She passes out like once or twice, but like she's pretty lucid and in on top of things.
Yeah, it feels like a very physical
comparatively
performance. Like she's doing a lot throughout to like make her like it's the post-regeneration loopiness, but also just like kind of like this alien demeanor and way of going about things. And, you know, again, I could be, you know, it's possible I'm being excessively unkind, but when I think of like 13's general like doctory-ness in like the majority of her run, it's like she'll say some quirky stuff and be like, yeah, basically like hashtag quirky, hashtag it's okay to be a little goofy.
Yeah.
Small bean energy for like the for like the rest of it. And it's like, that's here a little bit, but not really.
Yeah, I genuinely feel like she gets like genuinely good like lines and shit. Like hang on, there's one that I took a picture of. Oh, it was when they say like, we need to take you to A&E, and she's like, I never go anywhere that's just initials. That's a good line. Yeah. Where is the like, that's really good actually.
Or like, again, just the like jumping ahead to where we've already been of just like, you know, I've lost my family. What do? I carry them with them, and the things that I do. It's just like, wow, what an insightful answer. It's almost like you're more interesting when you actually, you know, give input as opposed to like looking away and not talking about shit.
Yeah, exactly. Like the angsting didn't work out in the long run. And yeah, I will also say here, shout outs to Carl, the normal guy on the train. I genuinely think Carl is one of Chibnall's best ancillary characters. I think he's really funny. I like the fact that the other major like player in this episode is just some guy who does not give a shit and just wants to go to work. He's like, I am not interested. I don't want to deal with any of this shit. I just want to go to work. And he sits in his fucking crane and listens to motivational tapes. It's good. It's really good. I wish Chibnall ancillary characters had that much sauce.
And then the bit where she's like, jump, and he goes, I'm scared of heights. And she's like, come the fuck on, man.
You work on a crane. Yeah.
Let my man grill. He just wants to grill. Yeah, he was a highlight. A lot of the other ancillary characters, honestly, pretty typical Chibnall. I think I've narrowed down another part of like why a bunch of this era rubs me the wrong way, and it's present here. And that there's kind of just like, I know Doctor Who has a high body count, but it's like this episode went out of its way at times to be like kind of pointlessly cruel. Like,
okay, but Salad Guy is legendary.
Okay, true.
No dissing Salad Guy.
No, yeah, he's fine, but
he's the other best Chibnall ancillary character.
But then the like guard and is just like, you know, I'm so lucky that I have a granddaughter like you.
Yeah, he basically does the I'm 2 days away from retirement shtick. Like, just actually, unironically.
Yeah. Say it with me again, kids. Everything is only kind of bad.
Yeah, I will say, like, we haven't even seriously talked about the villain plot that much, and like, admittedly, like, yes, it's not a presence as much as it's usually not a presence. And I feel like it isn't really worth bringing up the fact that they bring that guy back and fumble the bag really badly, because it's like, whatever, man. But like, here, for the role that he needs to play in the episode, he's fine. And I actually kind of like the aesthetic idea and vibes. I think it's just hamstrung by the fact that it is a level of body horror that Doctor Who can't really go full ham on and still remain, like, airable. Like, how they very carefully do not show that dude's corpse after they kill him and just describe, like, oh, they ripped, you know, broke his jaw and took a tooth out, because they couldn't show that on the thing. And I think it kind of needed that for that, like, visceral level. but like, you know, on like in a base level, like freaky alien warrior guy who implants the teeth of the people that he kills into him is a pretty raw idea, actually, and it looks fine in the episode. They just could have gone harder with it.
I do actually like the effect of his face. I don't know if it was like a mask or a CG or a combo of the two, but
it's probably a mask.
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, and like the whole idea of that his species is just like runs so cold that touch can kill people. Like that's an element of that creature that I forgot and isn't really present in, I guess, like kind of other similar-ish species. Like I guess you could do that with the ice warriors, but they haven't.
Yeah.
So like sure, you know, use that concept here. The tentacle, make your jokes here. The that whole thing is kind of like take it or leave it.
The coils. Yeah, but it does what it needs to do.
Yeah, it's like it's back burner stuff. But it does come to a point later where again things become kind of bad, and I'm just like, oh yeah, this is how, you know, these kind of situations are like dealt with in this era. It's very amusing and simultaneously annoying. But yeah, you know, it's not, I don't think there's any like extra dings for like the alien plot being not all that, because in most of the Doctor introductory episodes it's also like serviceable generally. Again, not everything can be the 11th hour.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just like, I think the part where they get into the nighttime runaround is just like decently enjoyable enough on a base level that like, while it's not like, you know, going crazy and you know, breaking new ground, like it's still like entertaining enough, I think. Also just because I like the vibes. I dig the vibes of how it looks a lot, honestly. Like, it's weird how they don't really explore like I you know what? I'll just bring this up again now. It feels weird that this season isn't an Earthbound season a la like early Third Doctor, because it feels like there's a lot of implied personality crammed into Sheffield here, especially Sheffield at night, and they never do anything with it again.
Yeah. It really is like, it's almost jarring at the end when they just like get the TARDIS back. Like,
well, they don't get the TARDIS back in this one, but yes.
When they just like immediately set up to get the TARDIS
when they
back.
leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Sheffield never had the opportunity, and it's not like there weren't a lot of Moffat locations that like became, you know, as iconic as like Cardiff was as like a central location, but Sheffield definitely again has that potential. And it's like, I did get vibes when they were like driving around trying to like solve shit that like, oh, this could have been like really cool. It's like, you know, weird thing to bring up Scooby-Doo, I guess, but just like if all these people had like local connections, like you had Grace and you had Yaz who could like, you know, kind of network with the police, but also, you know, go off the grid because she's a bit adventurous and like a bit of a rogue. And then you have Ryan who could like have gotten more of like, you know, I guess like the warehouse, like maybe industrial side of things, and then like Graham would transport. So it's just like you had all these characters that could work like really well as like a ensemble piece, but then you just pluck all of them and then like put them in a setting where like they can't really work to their strengths that you're setting up here. It's really weird.
Yeah, it really feels like, again, because I think that would play to Torchwood's forte, I mean, to Chibnall's forte. I really think not having to change locations every week and being able to just, you know, go a bit slower on things and delve more into character stuff and all of that really would have maybe made this thing work. but I guess they felt like they didn't want to rock the boat too much. But what happens then is that you just kind of get Doctor Who by numbers with some baffling politics for 5 years.
Yeah, you
and
say,
that's
like,
really sad because there's a promising start here.
yeah, it's like, oh, we'll have these many, companions with this dynamic. Okay, what are you going to do with that? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
female doctor, are you going to do anything with that? And then, what about setting? What about, oh, you're not going to have returning aliens? You're going to just have all new stuff? That's interesting. Oh, no, you dropped. Okay, cool. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like each successive Chibnall season does feel kind of like a reaction to responses to the previous one / world events with Flux.
Yeah.
Like, it really feels like, and, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it really does feel like Series 12 is like him going, okay, people said that the previous season was kind of bland and boring and that the no returning monsters thing didn't work out too well, so fuck it. We're going to do RTD cosplay for a bit and have this crazy arc and all that shit.
Except it's
and
not
bring
good.
back the Cybermen. Yeah, except it's not good.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you don't even really need to do... I suppose setting it on Earth, would be... I mean, 9 was kind of Earthbound, but not really, Yeah. He could still travel in time, but, like... I'm sure there are simpler things he could have done, even if he didn't want to do that could have made the show feel fresh and new without... And this is kind of getting into a whole overall, kind of bird's eye view of things, but it's like, it's incredible how just with this trailer of, the upcoming season of Doctor Who that we're going to get, at this time of recording, 2024, March, that, like, just the fact that, like, oh, more supernatural things are happening. Just that alone feels like a potentially massive sea change of just, like, how the show can operate. And it's just like, okay, I don't know. I don't know what point I'm trying to make here, only that, like, he could have changed things. And I know we're reviewing what he did make and not what he could have, but, like, yeah.
And again, to be fair to him, it does sound like he had there was a fair amount of general production issues during his tenure, and I don't want to necessarily say that all of that is his fault. I think it's entirely likely that some of that is the BBC's fault too. And we know a lot of scripts, like, did not get the time and attention they deserved and all that sort of thing. I mean, it's clearly obvious given by the fact that RTD is, like, writing scripts like 2 years out from where the episode is going to air, that, like, I guess the way that things were back when in Doctor Who's heyday, like, just weren't going to work anymore with what the show was going to be production wise. But I mean, also at the same time, you have a pared down episode count with Flux even. And even then, when you're trying to make one big cohesive story, even then everything was just completely all over the place. So I don't know. It's just...
Yeah.
It is what it is.
And
it exists now. I've made my peace with that.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it was better. At least this episode and a couple other ones are pretty decent.
The more I think about this, the more I'm struggling. Like, there's so many, like, things that are, sort of off with Chibnall. And I the more I think about it, though, I feel like there's, like, some core thing that I'm missing that, like, really defines why it doesn't work. And it's just something about how when you watch these episodes, they just feel so empty in a way. Like, I can't even put my finger on what it is. Like, some combination of the editing and, like, how it's shot and just the writing makes it feel like hardly anything happens in these episodes. Not in the sense of, like, nothing happens plot-wise, but just that they're so not dense. I struggle to explain what I mean by this, but there's just this feeling that it's also superficial, that there's nothing there, and there's almost, like, nothing even notable happening.
Yeah, it feels like It feels like there wasn't the same level of enthusiasm. I mean, I can't even say on the creative side in general,
Yeah.
because I feel like that definitely discretes everything, but I feel like the writing maybe didn't have the same enthusiasm in most of the places. And, you know, again, this is all big speculation, Banner. We don't know if any of this is actually true. This has never been confirmed. But there have always been rumors kicking around that Chibnall never particularly wanted to showrun Doctor Who, but there was literally no one else, and he didn't want the show to die. And I think to some extent you can feel that. Like, it feels like so much of it is, except for the rare times where you get something that's pretty decent or is a good starting off point like this, it does kind of feel like the show is just killing time to whatever the next thing is. It feels like it is liminal Doctor Who.
Yes.
It's in between what it was and what it can be.
Just saying, like, during this time also is kind of when there was definitely like a sea change of like how TV was being like
Yes.
consumed, and, you know, not even necessarily consumed, but like also produced. And I'm not even, you know, none of us are British and have like anywhere near the insight of like what the BBC was probably shifting around like during those times. So I'm sure there's like, and that's not to take away from like things that I think genuinely don't work, or like, you know, instances where I genuinely think some bits of the writing are like cruel or even offensive on occasions, but like I can get how this would be like a time where it would probably take even more effort to make like something like on the level of quality that like RTD was when he was like at the peak of his, at the top of his game.
Yeah.
You know, I can understand that. But yeah, like at the same time, kind of like what, I forget who said it, but like there are just moments that like feel empty, and then like they feel like, oh, something has to happen now. I particularly felt that when Ryan and Yaz were like talking in like the warehouse, and they just randomly find the guy's computer, and it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
what's this? And then it's like, oh, if I die, this is how I tracked down this pod through this technobabble bullshit, and it killed my sister. And it's just like, okay, things just happen. Things are just happening. It's like that liminal space thing. Yeah, it's a truly puzzling era from like all different angles.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like the thing that immediately like popped out to me, I guess, is like that first scene when Ryan and Yaz first meet back up. There's like, you know, they have dialogue about like what they're up to and all that sort of thing. And it's fine enough dialogue, and it works well to establish the character. But I noticed that it just kind of interrupted mid-scene when there's like more pressing things that they could be like talking about, or, you know, all of that. It feels more artificially like worked in, as opposed to like an RTD script where I feel like they'd meet up under different circumstances and have that conversation in a less like, hey, there's something that's going on here type situation.
Yeah.
And it's like that's kind of like, it's another common complaint of like Chibnall episodes will literally come to a screeching halt because it is now time for the characters to talk. And, you know, that is how pacing and things work in good storytelling, but you need to be more careful about disguising that and building into that, as opposed to just going, talk now.
yeah.
Okay, we're done. Back to the other stuff.
Yeah, what I was gonna say
Yeah.
before is that like now that I think about it, these episodes like almost feel like AI generated Doctor Who, like in a way that's hard to explain. It's like
That's okay. That's a bit far, I
okay,
think.
okay, it's not
I would
that like
be,
it's not
yeah.
quite at that level, but just like that feeling of there's no driving vision here, and a lot of it just feels like kind of superficial, and like it's like something that doesn't entirely understand how stories should work arriving at this point where it's like, okay, I need to introduce these characters, stop everything and have them explain that they went to the same elementary school. And then just like, what you were saying about the changing in TV methods, and then you definitely see like I notice it really acutely in this episode because yeah, it was in that period where there's that transition in sort of like visual style in both TV and movies, and I think that's why we get that like low depth of field, the weird like digital composition that's kind of taken over everything that I hate so much. It's just really
Yeah.
strange, like the weird darkness to the tones of things and the way shadows work on screen. I feel like took on a certain quality in the last few years, and you really feel it here. And just that
Yeah.
weird blurriness to the background of everything, and it's like
But they haven't figured it out yet,
yeah,
because I feel like they keep a lot of the visual hallmarks of the Chibnall era into RTD2, but the color grading is better, the lighting is better, the direction and cinematography are better. Like Mark Tonderai, who was a Chibnall era director, directed The Church on Ruby Road, and that episode looks pretty good.
yeah, it's just so weird. Like I don't know how to. Again, I don't know exactly how to explain it. It just all feels uncanny. Like it's trying to be an episode but isn't quite there.
Yeah.
I want to know what like people who like genuinely enjoy Chibnall Who, and I don't mean that like in a mean way, but I'm just like I just want to know what I'm missing, or if it's something
Yeah.
that like just some not qualia, something that I can't perceive. Just with how I approach this show, it's very strange. But it's like there's moments again like this episode where it's just like there are things here that I like, and maybe I'm just like not the fan for this era, but like it genuinely feels like all of the potential here is never followed through on at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it I'm grasping at straws here, and it's entirely possible that this isn't what happened. It's just you could maybe make it feels like that in places, that it feels like to some extent what happened with Chibnall Who is he came in and was like, I'm going to cast a woman as the Doctor and cast a great actress as the Doctor, and attempt to sincerely diversify the casting and general production crew of Doctor Who. And then he went, all right, cool, I'm not rocking the boat anymore. I don't want to rock it anymore. People might not like it. Like, it feels like it took genuine risks in one hyper specific area, but then didn't in any other, and that caused it to fail what it attempted to do with casting in that hyper specific area, because the whole product ended up being so half-baked.
And I think this is at first I was kind of sad that we weren't doing Chibnall era, but also now that we're here, and obviously we're not going like legitimately in order like we have been with everything else,
Yeah.
but it's just like, okay, I could see us like kind of coming around to this point nearly every episode we do, just in like different variations and different orders, because I feel like there's a bingo card for like what eccentricities and idiosyncrasies the Chibnall era has that just like different episodes have to different degrees. Because yeah, it is impressive how like Chibnall era doesn't really rock the boat, and of course all the reactionary YouTuber types that were like up and coming or already around during that time were just like, oh, Doctor Who's dead, there's a woman now. But even now it's like with the little that RTD2 has been around, it's just like we've gotten like a magical girl like trans positive story, like even in that aspect, it seems like it's put more money where its mouth has been than like the past however many years. It's just
Yeah.
it's mad. It's not maddening, but it's just, yeah. We would be in this cycle. We would be in purgatory right up until Power of the Doctor. And honestly, at that point, Power of the Doctor would probably be a relief.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, it's just, again, and it feels, I guess, it feels sad because I think this episode's pretty decent, but what ends up happening is that I feel like I don't have much to say about like how it's good other than just like, yeah, it's pretty decent. It was decently entertaining. I had an all right time with it. It doesn't inspire the same level of, well, I mean, it inspires the critical analysis, but it inspires the critical analysis for its faults more than anything that stands out as particularly good, because nothing stands out as particularly good. It just stands out as fine, other than a few key bits. Like, oh, actually, here's one right here that I just saw because I saw the image that's used on the wiki page. The 13th Doctor making her own Sonic with her own bare hands out of, bits and bobs that's around. That's a great scene. That's a great character bit. They don't really do much with that. Like, it would be really interesting if, you had the gadget spy doctor. It would be cool if you had like the engineer doctor that just like made all sorts of shit to fit the episode. But they don't really. Yeah,
especially if she was stranded on Earth and she had to like recreate her tech.
Yeah.
It's like the good points are like potential and just like standard base, like, okay, you've set up your characters, now go. And it's like, that's good. I appreciate it. Yeah.
I mean, that's I guess that's about what I have to say on this. I think that covers all the bits that I have. I think we've kind of summed all that up.
I did want to talk about the one bit that was like, okay, this is like a sign, and it's a very specific sign that I've noticed, where it's like most of the Doctors have like moments of like, they're very like moral people in the sense that like they stand up for what they think is right and like blah 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 blah. But just like the way in which 13 kind of applies that in a weird way is like, when at the very end where she's already implanted like the DNA bombs back into this guy because reverse the polarity, yada yada yada, cool. He's like, it looks like he's actively melting and like dying, and the guy, the base Chad, just wants to cook, just wants to grill, kicks him off the crane, and then he teleports away, and then she's like, you had no right to do that, and it completely like breaks the energy of the scene. It's just like, yeah, that's another part of the moral code of the Doctor that just like feels like 13 is like fundamentally like kind of out of sync with at least the Doctors that I vibe with. That's one thing I did want to bring up, but yeah, it's just interesting. Yeah,
I feel like, I don't know, does the thing where she like implants the bombs back into Tim Shaw but then gets mad at Carl for shoving him off, even though like he still like teleports away all right, like, does that feel that much more different from other Doctors? Because it feels kind of off to me, but not enough to be really jarring, I guess. Like, it does kind of feel hypocritical because it's like, you did just deal grievous bodily harm to him, and like, you didn't have a way of definitively knowing that wouldn't have killed him.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
there's levels of hypocrisy in like a lot of the ways that like, I mean, definitely 11 in particular I can think of has done a lot of like, well, I didn't technically directly kill him,
Yeah.
but it's like I think a difference there is just like there's hypocrisy that's a general element of the character, and then there's like the ones that like are kind of like immediately like self-righteous in it, and
Yeah.
maybe this is some, it could very well be that I have some internalized misogyny and that I, ding 13 more for this, but I would hope, because that's just kind of like a dumb line to have at the end of that scene, that it's like not exactly that, and that it's not that when she's defending Space Amazon, and it's not that when she sends a POC master to the Nazis, but who knows?
Yeah. It's certainly not 13's worst girl boss moment.
No, again, it's like, oh, this is like a sign.
Yeah. No, it's the kind of thing that you don't notice unless you're like aware of how things get later. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, as I've said, it's a perfectly fine episode that I think actually got a lot more care and attention to it than a lot of Chibnall episodes, and I think it got that benefit by being like the first one. But at the same time, I'll be sitting there, I'll be decently enjoying it, I'll be going like, yeah, this is pretty decent, and then just there will constantly be little things that aren't bad, but they are omens of ill for the future. And it's just like it's impossible for me to watch this episode and not notice them as much as I enjoy it. So I feel like it ultimately still kind of has to be like, it can't be more than like a B at most. Like, it is perfectly serviceable in what it sets out to do, but that means that it also doesn't have that much of an amazing identity of its own. And again, it is an ill portent.
Yeah. The Woman Who Fell to Earth is an interesting Doctor Who story, just for, the era that it kicks off. Kind of, as we've talked about, the, shifting landscape of television and writing, so on and so forth. There's a lot here to like. There's a lot here that is good and even well shot and directed, and the setting up of the characters and the setting, and interesting points for the 13th Doctor and her performance in general, the Sonic. There's a lot of good. There's also a lot of stuff that's kind of off or kind of bad, and only by a little bit. And because of the retrospective nature, and we know where we know where the potential is lived up to, which is not a lot, and we know where the potential is squandered, which is quite a lot. So it makes for an interesting viewing experience that is, decent. It's serviceable. It is fine, but it can never really be more than that. And unfortunately, it suffers from a lot of, at least the Chibnall syndrome we have, that the more we think and talk about it, the more we're drawn into the spiral of what the fuck happened.
Yeah.
So, for me, this episode is more enjoyable in how it is intellectually interesting than in, the actual contents of it. So I would give it like a decent, strong 7 out of 10.
Does it get a not bad on the Fantano scale?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, it's a really weird episode because I don't necessarily disenjoy it. It's just there's so many things that just leave it feeling empty in a way that really antecedes everything that comes after this. We just get so little character in this episode, and what we get, I know, to never be followed up upon, and just like the visual problems, just so many things about style and how it's written. It just adds up. And so even though it's on its own, it's a pretty good episode, or not, I wouldn't say pretty good. It's all right. So it's just a very 6 out of 10, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, we got the Chibnall Demon Pit out of the way. That's all done now. We're safe for a little while more, and we are now down to only 3 entries on the wheel. And once we've depleted the wheel, we will of course restock it with everything again, but we still have 3 doctors who we haven't covered at all. So I guess we're going to spin it and see what we get. Ooh, please, 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 please! Yeah, baby! It's 6y time! Okay, time to watch another one that I have not seen before, because next time we are going to be watching the 6th Doctor story, Vengeance on Varos, which, from what I understand, was one of the episodes that was, like, violent enough that it was getting people to start wondering what the fuck had happened to the show. So, I'm interested to see how that plays out.
Great.
Until then, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at B2TARDISPod. I'm Geoff. You can follow me on Twitter at WheatleyDL.
I'm Aurora. You can follow me, the system, at Twitter, on Twitter, at Ahura Borealis.
I'm June, and you can follow us at AGPenis.
And we will see you all next time.